The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Psalm 34:18. Daniel Rivers sat on the cold city sidewalk, his body disheveled and exhausted. His clothes were tattered, an old jacket and a pair of worn-out jeans reflecting the hard life he led. People passed him by, some not even noticing his presence, others tossing a few coins into his old plastic cup. Daniel looked down at the ground, his eyes weary and filled with sadness. He remembered a time not so long ago when he was a respected man in his community. Back then, Daniel was a master stonemason, a skilled craftsman proud of his work. With strong, capable hands, he shaped stone, creating structures that would last for centuries. His work was his passion and filled him with a deep sense of purpose. Every day, Daniel returned to his modest but cozy home. Upon opening the door, he was always greeted by the warm smile of his wife, Samantha, and the cheerful greeting of his young daughter, Lily. Samantha, with her dark hair and bright eyes, was the pillar of his life. Lily, with her contagious laughter and boundless energy, filled the house with joy. Family nights were moments of simple happiness, having dinner together and sharing stories of the day. But everything changed abruptly. Daniel still remembers clearly the day he received the draft notice for the war in Iraq. It was a cloudy morning, and the sound of the mail dropping into the mailbox echoed like thunder in the silence of his home. Upon opening the letter, he felt a knot in his stomach. The war was calling him, and there was no way to avoid it. The news was a devastating blow to the family. Samantha tried to stay strong, but her eyes reflected worry and fear. Lily, too young to fully understand, only knew that her dad was leaving and that everyone was sad. The farewell was emotional. Daniel hugged Samantha tightly, feeling the desperation in her embrace. "I'll be back soon," he told her, though he wasn't sure if it was true. Lily, with her little arms around his neck, whispered in his ear, "Daddy, don't go for too long." Daniel couldn't hold back the tears as he kissed his daughter's forehead, promising her that he would return. That promise would haunt him in the dark days to come. Time in Iraq was a living hell. Daniel faced constant danger. The sound of explosions and the whistling of bullets were his daily reality. But what weighed on him most was the distance from his family. Each day on the front lines was a struggle, not only for his life, but also to keep alive the hope of returning home. The night was dark and silent in the Iraqi desert, except for the murmurs and whispers of the soldiers at the base. Daniel Rivers, along with his unit, was preparing for another patrol. The air was thick with dust and tension. The soldiers' faces reflected a mixture of fatigue and determination. "Ready, guys?" asked the sergeant, his voice low but firm. The men nodded, exchanging glances of support and understanding. They knew what it meant to go out there, the constant danger, possibility of not returning. The patrol advanced slowly through the narrow, desolate streets of a ruined city. Shadows moved around them. Every corner, every window, potential threat. Daniel kept his eyes peeled, senses alert. Beside him, Corporal Ramirez muttered, "What do you think there'll be for dinner tonight, Rivers?" "Usual, probably," Daniel replied with a weary smile. "Some kind of ration that even dogs wouldn't eat." "I'd settle for anything that isn't explosive," Ramirez said, trying to ease the tension with a touch of humor. Suddenly, an explosion ripped through the air. Daniel was thrown to the ground, the deafening sound of the blast ringing in his ears. Dust and debris filled the air, mixing with the shouts of his comrade. He tried to get up, but a sharp pain shot through his right shoulder. Daniel, are you okay?" Ramirez's voice reached his ears, distant and blurry. "My shoulder? I can't move it," Daniel gasped, pain intensifying with each attempt to move. His comrades dragged him to safety, away from the chaos. Daniel felt as if the world was spinning around him, every movement amplifying his pain. Finally, darkness enveloped him. When Daniel awoke, he was in a field hospital. The sounds of war still echoed in the distance, but here everything was different. Doctors and nurses moved quickly, treating the wounded. A doctor approached his bed. "Soldier Rivers, I'm Dr. Allen. You've suffered a severe fracture in your shoulder. We'll need to operate immediately." "Am I going to be all right?" Daniel asked, uncertainty in his voice. "I'll do my best," the doctor replied with a serious look. The surgery was long and complicated. Daniel woke up hours later, his shoulder bandaged and numb. Rehabilitation was hard, each movement a test of his endurance. Days turned into weeks, and although he regained some mobility, pain persisted. "Rivers," Dr. Allen said one day, "we have to be realistic. Your shoulder will never be the same. This will limit your physical capabilities." The doctor's words were like a punch to the gut. Daniel nodded silently, the reality of his situation sinking in. He knew this would change his life forever. Finally, the day came to return home. The journey back was long and filled with turbulent thoughts. Upon arrival, Daniel was greeted with hugs and tears. Samantha and Lily were waiting for him at the door, their faces a mixture of joy and concern. "Daddy!" Lily cried, running towards him. Daniel lifted her with his good arm, feeling a pang of pain and love. "Welcome home, love," Samantha said, her eyes shining with tears. "It's good to be back," Daniel replied, trying to hide his own physical and emotional pain. The joy of reunion was short-lived. Daniel's inability to work soon became apparent. Bills piled up, and tension in the household increased. Each day, Daniel struggled with his own frustration, seeing how his disability affected his family. "We need to find a solution," Samantha said one night, her voice laced with worry. "I know," Daniel replied, voice weary. "I'm doing the best I can." But in his heart, Daniel knew his best wasn't enough. The war had left its mark not only on his body, but also on his soul. And as he looked at his wife and daughter, he realized that the real battle was just beginning. Every morning, Daniel Rivers rose with the first rays of sun, even though his body longed for rest. With his shoulder still aching and stiff, he dressed slowly, preparing for another day of trying to reclaim some of his old life. The kitchen table was empty, except for a few papers, unpaid bills, and service disconnection notices. The weight of responsibility felt like a yoke around his neck. Arriving at the construction site, Daniel encountered his former colleagues. Some greeted him with respect, others with pity. "Ready to work?" Daniel asked Tom, former boss, trying to sound optimistic. "I'll try," Daniel replied, forcing a smile. He grabbed a bag of cement and with effort tried to lift it. The pain in his shoulder was immediate and sharp, forcing him to drop the bag before fully lifting it. "Damn it," he muttered, rubbing his shoulder. "Easy, man. Take your time," Tom said, but the worry was evident on his face. Throughout the day, Daniel made several attempts to perform simple tasks, each attempt a cruel reminder of his limitations. By the end of the day, his frustration was palpable. He felt useless, a burden to everyone, especially his family. Back home, the tension was almost tangible. Samantha was in the kitchen, face tired and worried. "How did it go today?" she asked without much enthusiasm. "The same as always. I can't do much with this damn shoulder," Daniel replied, his voice laced with frustration. The nights were long and filled with uncomfortable silences. Samantha had started working double shifts at a nearby restaurant to try to cover the bills. Lily, their daughter, felt the tension, although she was too young to fully understand. One day, while Daniel was going through the mail, he found more bills, each one seeming more urgent than the last. "We can't go on like this," Samantha said, voice strained. "We need more income. I can't do this alone." "I know, Samantha, but I'm doing the best I can," Daniel replied, feeling the helplessness growing inside of him. "Your best isn't enough," she retorted, words coming out before she could stop them. The room fell into a cold and oppressive silence. The arguments became more frequent, each one leaving scars on their relationship. Samantha was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, and Daniel couldn't bear the thought of being the cause of her suffering. "We need a solution, Daniel," she said one night, tears of frustration and desperation rolling down her cheeks. "I know," Daniel replied, his voice barely a whisper. "But I don't know what else I can do." One afternoon, Daniel arrived home after a particularly difficult day, hoping to find some solace in his family. But the house was strangely silent. "Samantha? Lily?" he called out, but there was no response. He walked through the house, each room empty and desolate. On the kitchen table, he found a note written in Samantha's handwriting. "Daniel, I can't go on like this. Michael has offered me an opportunity that I can't refuse. He can give us the stability we need, something you can no longer provide. I'm taking Lily because it's what's best for her. I'm sorry. This is the best decision for everyone. Samantha." Daniel read the note over and over, unable to believe his eyes. He slumped into a chair, feeling as if the ground was opening up beneath him. The betrayal and devastation were like an open wound in his heart. The woman he loved, the family he had fought for, everything was crumbling around him. That night, Daniel sat in the darkness, staring at the note again and again. Every word was a reminder of his failure, of how he had lost everything that had once been important to him. The pain in his shoulder paled in comparison to the pain in his heart. Daniel's downfall wasn't swift. It was a slow, agonizing descent marked by every unpaid bill, every bitter argument, and finally, the departure of his family. The sun had barely risen when Daniel Rivers headed to the construction site, hoping that a day of hard work could bring some stability to his life. However, upon arrival, he was met with cold stares and disdainful looks from some of his former colleagues. Tom, his boss, called him aside. "Daniel, we need to talk," Tom said, avoiding eye contact. Daniel felt a knot in his stomach. "What's wrong?" "I'm sorry, but we can't keep you on any longer. Your performance hasn't been the same since your injury. It's affecting all of us," Tom explained, his tone a mix of pity and resignation. Daniel nodded slowly, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I understand, Tom. Thanks for the opportunity." He gathered his things, heavy steps reflecting the weight of the news. As he left the site, some workers murmured among themselves, not bothering to hide their disdain. "About time," one said. "He was only slowing us down," another added mockingly. "Maybe he should have stayed in the war." Daniel closed his eyes, trying to block out the cruel words. He knew there was nothing he could do to change his situation, only to accept the reality. The following days were a constant struggle. Without a steady job, Daniel was forced to take on odd jobs, but the few coins he earned weren't enough to cover his basic needs. With each passing day, his hopes dwindled a little more. Finally, the day came when he couldn't pay the rent. The landlord, showing no ounce of compassion, evicted him. Daniel was now a homeless man. As night fell, he sought refuge under a bridge, using cardboard and a tattered blanket to shield himself from the cold. The streets were ruthless and full of dangers. Every day was a fight to find food and a safe place to sleep. His daily routine began to take on him a monotonous and desperate form. At dawn, he would head to soup kitchens, seeking a hot meal. Some days he was lucky and managed to get something to eat. Other days, he contented himself with scavenging through dumpsters, hoping to find something still edible. People on the street looked at him with disdain, or worse, indifference. He was invisible to most. One day, while searching for something to eat, a well-dressed man walked past him and said with disdain, "Get a job, you lazy bum." Daniel felt humiliation burn in his chest, but he didn't respond. He didn't have the strength to confront the cruelty of those who couldn't understand his situation. As the weeks turned into months, the loneliness intensified. Daniel would spend long hours sitting on a park bench, reminiscing about the happy days with his family. Lily's laughter, the warm dinners with Samantha, all seemed to belong to another life. The nights were the worst when the silence became deafening, and memories attacked him mercilessly. However, amidst his misery, Daniel found small sparks of humanity. He shared what little he had with other homeless people. One night, he found an elderly woman shivering from the cold under a bridge. Without a second thought, he offered her his blanket. "Thank you," she said in a weak voice. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Another day, while looking for food, he saw a young man trying to calm his younger brother, who was crying from hunger. Daniel broke off a piece of his bread and gave it to him. "Here, take this. Children need it more than we do," he said with a weary smile. These small acts of kindness gave Daniel a reason to keep going. Although his life was in ruins, he could still do some good for others. These actions didn't solve his situation, but they reminded him that he was still human, that he still had something to offer. The neighborhood where Edward and Laura lived was a jewel of luxury and opulence. Grand mansions lined the streets, surrounded by impeccably manicured gardens and high walls that provided privacy to their inhabitants. Edward and Laura's house stood out even in this setting. It was an imposing white stone structure with large windows and a grand dark wood door that invited one to enter. Edward was a very busy businessman, but always made time for his family. Laura, his wife, was the director of a local art gallery. Together, they were the parents of Grace, a lively and energetic 7-year-old girl. Grace loved running around the gardens, playing with her dog Max, and exploring every corner of the house. Her laughter echoed constantly, filling every space with joy. That evening, while Edward was reviewing some documents in his study and Laura was preparing a special dinner in the kitchen, Grace was playing in her room with Max. The girl was busy building a tower of colored blocks, concentrating on her task. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple. Suddenly, the smell of smoke filled the air. Laura was the first to notice it. "Do you smell that?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly as she walked towards the living room. Edward looked up from his papers and frowned. "Yes, I smell it. Where is it coming from?" Before they could investigate further, an explosion ripped through the house, shaking the walls and knocking down some paintings. "My God!" Laura screamed, running towards Grace's room. Fire spread rapidly, devouring curtains and furniture. Flames advanced with unstoppable ferocity, filling the rooms with thick, black smoke. Grace, trapped in her room, started coughing and screaming for help. Max barked desperately, trying to protect the girl. Meanwhile, Daniel was wandering through the neighborhood, looking for some shelter for the night. He'd had a particularly difficult day and was exhausted. Suddenly, he saw thick smoke billowing into the sky and heard panicked screams. Without hesitation, he started running toward the source of the chaos. Reaching Edward and Laura's mansion, he saw the magnitude of the fire. Neighbors had gathered around, some calling the fire department, others trying to help in any way they could. Daniel saw Laura, who was trying to get into the house but was being held back by Edward. "Grace is inside," Laura cried desperately. "It's too dangerous," Edward said, his voice filled with fear and frustration. Daniel didn't think twice. He pushed through the crowd and headed for the entrance to the house. "I'm going in," he shouted. Before anyone could stop him, he plunged into the fire. The heat was unbearable. Flames roared around him, and the smoke burned his eyes and throat. Daniel advanced blindly, guided only by Grace's cries. "Grace!" he shouted, coughing as he went deeper into the house. "Here, I'm here!" Girl responded, voice filled with terror. Daniel followed the sound, dodging burning furniture and chunks of falling ceiling. Finally, he reached Grace's room. The girl was huddled in a corner, Max by her side. Daniel lifted her in his arms, feeling her small body tremble with fear. "It's going to be all right," he said with as much calmness as he could muster. "I'm going to get you out of here." The way back was even more difficult. The fire had advanced, blocking some of the routes Daniel had used before. With Grace clinging to his neck and Max following closely behind, Daniel looked for an alternative exit. He found a window overlooking the garden and, with one last effort, broke the glass with his elbow. Carefully, he helped Grace and Max out before following them himself. Outside, firefighters had arrived and were controlling the blaze. Edward and Laura rushed to embrace Grace, tears of relief streaming down their faces. Thank you," Laura sobbed, holding her daughter tightly. Daniel, exhausted and soot-covered, nodded silently. The family's gratitude was overwhelming, but he was just glad he could help. As he walked away from the scene, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. Despite everything he had lost, he had still been able to save a life. And in that moment, he found a glimmer of hope in the ashes of his despair. Edward and Laura ran towards Grace, hugging her tightly as tears streamed down their faces. Daniel, exhausted and covered in soot, lapsed on the grass, gasping for air. The sound of fire engine sirens filled the air as flames still consumed parts of the house. When they saw Grace in Daniel's arms, indescribable relief washed over them. "Grace!" Laura cried out, tears streaming down her face. Edward was close behind her, his face a mixture of worry and relief. "We're okay, Mom, Dad," Grace said, still trembling. Laura hugged her tightly, kissing her hair as tears continued to fall. Thank you," was all Edward could say, looking at Daniel with astonishment and gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you for what you've done." Daniel, still catching his breath, just nodded. "I did what I had to do," he replied, his voice hoarse from the smoke. Edward and Laura quickly learned of Daniel's situation while Grace received medical attention. Edward approached Daniel, his face full of determination. "Come to my office tomorrow. I want to help you." The next day, Daniel found himself in Edward's office, It was a stark contrast to his life on the streets, an elegant office filled with high-quality furniture and artwork on the walls. Edward greeted him warmly. "Daniel, what you did was incredible. I want to offer you a significant reward," Edward said, pulling out a check from his desk. Daniel looked at it and shook his head. "I don't need money. I need a job and opportunity to rebuild my life." Edward was struck by Daniel's humility and determination. "Very well, Daniel. I'll give you a chance and start as my assistant." The first few days at the office were a challenge for Daniel. His initial tasks included organizing files, answering calls, and running errands. He approached each task, no matter how small, with seriousness and dedication. Edward watched him closely, impressed by his work ethic. "Daniel, I need you to take these documents to the boardroom," Edward said one day. "Of course, sir," Daniel replied, carefully taking the documents. As the days passed, Daniel adjusted to his new environment. His movements became more confident, and his attitude more positive. One afternoon, while Daniel was organizing some files, Grace came running into the office. "Daniel, Daniel," she cried, hugging him enthusiastically. "Hello, Grace," Daniel said, returning the hug. "How are you?" "I'm good. Thank you for saving me," the girl said, her face lit up by a smile. Daniel felt a warmth in his heart. "It was my pleasure, Grace. I'm glad you're okay." Edward watched the scene from the doorway, feeling a deep respect for Daniel. He knew he had made the right decision in giving him a chance. "Daniel, come to my office for a moment," Edward said. Daniel followed him, wondering what it was about. Upon entering, Edward sat down and gestured for him to do the same. "Daniel, you have proven to be a man of incredible courage and dedication. I want to offer you something. I would like you to stay with the company long term. I have plans for expansion, and I believe you could be a key player in them." Daniel was speechless for a moment. "I don't know what to say, sir. I'm very grateful for the opportunity." "Just keep doing what you've been doing," Edward replied with a smile. Daniel's life was changing. He had found not only a job, but also a purpose. Gratitude of Edward and Laura and the opportunity they had given him were more valuable than any monetary reward. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Daniel realized he was on the path to rebuilding his life, dignity, and hope. Every morning, Daniel Rivers arrived at the office early, ready to learn and grow in his new role. His daily routine began with organizing files and handling basic administrative tasks. Although the tasks seemed simple at first, Daniel knew they were essential to the company's operation. Edward, always observant, assigned him small responsibilities and watched how Daniel handled them. "Good morning, Daniel," Edward said one morning, entering the office. "We have an important meeting with some investors today. Can you prepare the documents we need?" "Of course, sir," Daniel replied with determination, although he still felt a slight insecurity. As Daniel familiarized himself with the work environment, he began to better understand the company's internal processes. Edward, seeing Daniel's effort and dedication, decided to take him under his wing as a mentor. "Daniel, you have a moment?" Edward asked him one day, gesturing for him to sit down in his office. "Of course, sir," Daniel replied, entering Edward's spacious office. "I want you to learn more about the business," Edward said, gesturing to a stack of financial reports. "Let's go over these together. It's important that you understand how finances work if you want to move forward." Daniel nodded, grateful for the opportunity. The following days were filled with intensive lessons on accounting, investments, and resource management. First, Daniel felt overwhelmed by the amount of new information. Financial reports seemed like a maze of figures and technical terminology. "This is complicated," Daniel admitted one afternoon, frowning at a profit and loss statement. "It is, but not impossible," Edward replied with an encouraging smile. "Key is patience and practice. We all start somewhere." Over time, Daniel began to feel more comfortable with financial concepts. He spent hours studying after work, determined not to betray the trust Edward had placed in him. Daniel's perseverance did not go unnoticed by his colleagues. Gradually, he began to earn their respect. "Daniel, can you help us with this analysis?" a coworker asked him one day. "I've seen how you handle reports, and your perspective would be very helpful." "Sure, I'd be happy to help," Daniel replied, feeling a new level of confidence. As Daniel mastered his tasks and acquired new skills, Edward took notice of his progress. One day, he called him into his office for an important conversation. "Daniel, I'm very impressed with your dedication and learning," Edward said, looking him in the eye. "I think you're ready for more responsibility." Daniel felt a knot in his stomach, a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "I'm ready for any challenge, sir." "Good," said Edward, handing him a folder. "I want you to oversee this project. It's a big step, but I'm confident you can handle it." Daniel accepted the folder with renewed firmness. The following days were filled with planning meetings and coordination with different departments. Although he faced several challenges, such as time management and decision-making under pressure, each obstacle overcome strengthened his confidence. One afternoon, while reviewing the project's progress, Daniel received an unexpected visit. Edward entered the conference room and observed the progress. "You've done an excellent job, Daniel," he said, nodding in approval. "Your ability to lead and solve problems is remarkable." "Thank you, sir," Daniel replied, feeling a deep satisfaction. "I've learned a lot from you and everyone here." Edward's confidence in Daniel continued to grow. He decided to invest even more in his development, enrolling him in advanced training courses and offering him the opportunity to attend seminars and conferences. Each new piece of knowledge acquired was reflected in Daniel's performance, who quickly became a valuable and indispensable member of the team. One day, while walking down the office hallway, Daniel reflected on his journey to that point. From the cold city sidewalks to the warmth of the office, every step had been a lesson in perseverance and overcoming challenges. After months of hard work, Daniel's dedication finally paid off. One morning, while reviewing some reports at his desk, Edward entered the office with a smile on his face. "Daniel, I have good news," he said, taking a seat in front of him. "I want to promote you to financial advisor. You have shown exceptional commitment and ability." Daniel felt a wave of pride and relief. "Thank you, sir. You don't know how much this means to me." Edward smiled. "You've earned it, Daniel. Keep up the good work." Daniel nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. He had come a long way from the streets, and the journey had only just begun. With the support of Edward and Laura, he knew he could face any challenge and continue to grow, both professionally and personally. "You deserve it," Edward replied with a gesture of approval. "Your work has been impeccable, and I believe you have much more to offer." Promotion not only improved Daniel's position in the company, but also gave him a significant boost to his self-esteem. Every day, he felt more confident in his role, actively participating in important meetings and offering valuable financial advice. Gradually, he began to regain the confidence and sense of purpose he had lost during his years of struggle. Inspired by Daniel's story and his own desire to make a difference, Edward decided to start a non-profit organization to help other homeless people. "Daniel, I want you to help me lead this initiative," Edward told him one day in his office. "No one better than you understands what it's like to be in that situation and what it takes to get ahead." Daniel accepted enthusiastically. "It will be an honor, sir. There are many people out there who need a second chance." The process of setting up the organization was long and challenging, but Daniel dedicated himself to the task with the same determination he had shown in his work. He oversaw the logistics, from finding a suitable location for the offices to coordinating with suppliers and volunteers. He used his own experience, designed support programs that not only provided food and shelter, but also job training and psychological counseling. "I want this place to be a true starting point for all those who need it," Daniel would say in meetings with the volunteer team. "It's not just about giving them a roof over their heads, but about giving them the tools to rebuild their lives." Meanwhile, in his personal life, Daniel never stopped thinking about his daughter Lily. He knew that Samantha and Michael could offer her a stable life, but he longed to be a part of her life in some way. Without revealing his new situation, he began sending money to Lily anonymously, making sure she lacked nothing. One evening, after finishing a meeting about the charity, Daniel decided it was time to try to reconnect with Lily. He wrote a letter, his hands shaking but determined. "Dear Lily, I hope this letter finds you well. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about you. I know a lot of time has passed and many things have changed, but I want you to know that I will always be here for you. I love you very much. Love, Dad. Sending the letter was an act charged with emotion. He didn't know how Lily would react, but he hoped this was the first step in rebuilding their relationship. The days that followed were a mix of nervousness and hope. Every time the phone rang or he received a letter, his heart would race. Finally, one afternoon, while reviewing some documents in his office, he received a response. He opened it carefully, his heart pounding. Dear Dad, thank you for your letter. It's good to hear from you. I think about you too, and I hope we can talk more. I would like to know how you are and what you have been doing. Love, Lily. Tears welled up in Daniel's eyes as he read the letter. It was a small step, but for him, it meant the world. They began to exchange letters regularly, sharing small details of their lives. Although they hadn't seen each other in years, the letters began to rebuild the broken bridge between them. Daniel shared stories with Lily about his work at the charity and the achievements they were making. Lily, in turn, told him about school, friends, and her interests. These exchanges became a ray of sunshine in Daniel's life, giving him another reason to keep going. Daniel's life was changing significantly. His promotion at the company, his work at the charity, and the slow but hopeful reconnection with his daughter gave him a new perspective. He felt proud of what he had accomplished and was determined to continue building on that foundation. As he watched the progress of the charity and read Lily's letters, he knew that despite the hardships, he was on the right track. Daniel Rivers was walking through the city one afternoon when he unexpectedly ran into Samantha. Their eyes met, and time seemed to stand still. Samantha looked at him in amazement, unable to believe the drastic change in the man she had once left behind. Daniel, is that you? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Yes, it's me, Daniel replied, his tone calm but firm. The physical transformation was evident. He wore clean, well-kept clothes, and his posture reflected regained confidence and dignity. You look different, Samantha said, trying to find the right words. I've worked hard to get here, he replied without a trace of bitterness in his voice. I'm happy for you, Samantha said, lowering her gaze. Daniel, I know I hurt you. I've thought a lot about what happened, and I'm so sorry for leaving you. Daniel felt a mix of emotions. He remembered the pain and loneliness, but also recalled the happy moments they had shared. Samantha, I understand why you did it. It was a difficult time for all of us. She looked up, her eyes filled with hope. Do you think we could start over, for Lily's sake and for us? Daniel took a deep breath, struggling with his feelings. Samantha, I've learned to forgive you, but we can't go back to what we were. I've changed, and I have a new life now. My priority is Lily and our future. Samantha nodded slowly, tears in her eyes. I understand. Thank you for being honest. I will always be here for Lily. We can work together to make sure she has the best possible future, Daniel said, his voice firm but kind. The encounter with Samantha gave Daniel a sense of closure. There was no going back, but there was forgiveness and acceptance. He felt an inner peace he hadn't experienced in years. With his newfound focus, Daniel devoted more time to strengthening his relationship with Lily. They spent every weekend together, enjoying simple but meaningful activities. They walked in the park, visited museums, and spent hours talking about their lives and dreams. One day, while enjoying a picnic, Lily looked at her father with a smile. Dad, I'm so proud of you. You've done amazing things. Thank you, Lily. You are my greatest inspiration, Daniel replied, feeling a deep gratitude for the opportunity to be in her life. The connection between them grew stronger with each passing moment. Daniel saw in Lily the hope for a better future and committed to being the best father he could be for her. At work, Daniel continued to excel, both at the company and at the nonprofit organization, New Beginning. His story of overcoming adversity and resilience inspired everyone around him. Edward, seeing Daniel's positive impact, appointed him director of the organization. Daniel, you have proven to be a leader and an inspiration. I want you to take New Beginning to the next level, Edward said during a meeting. Thank you, sir. It is an honor and a privilege, Daniel replied, determined to continue making a difference. Every day, Daniel worked tirelessly to help others who, like him, fallen on hard times. He organized job workshops, emotional support sessions, and reintegration programs. The gratitude and respect of those he helped were a constant source of motivation. One afternoon, while reviewing some reports in his office, Daniel received an unexpected visit. It was a young man who had been living on the streets and now, thanks to New Beginning, had a job and a place to live. "I just wanted to thank you, Daniel. Your story gave me hope when I had nothing," the young man said, moved. Daniel smiled. "You don't have to thank me. Everyone deserves a second chance." Daniel's work not only transformed lives but also provided him with deep satisfaction and a sense of purpose. His life had come full circle, and every day was a testament to his resilience and determination. Looking ahead, Daniel continued to build on the foundations he had established. He maintained his commitment to Edward's company and expanded the reach of New Beginning. His story became a beacon of hope for many, proving that, with determination and support, any obstacle could be overcome. At the end of the day, Daniel would sit in his office reflecting on his journey. He had faced adversity and emerged stronger. Redemption wasn't just a word, it was his reality, built day by day with effort and heart. And so, with each sunrise, Daniel Rivers continued on his path, knowing that he had found not only his place in the world, but also his purpose and inner peace. Life lesson: in the darkest times, acts of kindness and bravery can spark hope and renewal. No matter how far we fall, the capacity to help others and make a difference remains within us, reminding us of our inherent worth and purpose. Hello everyone, I hope you enjoyed this incredible story of redemption and hope. It is a true testament to how, even in the darkest moments, we can find the strength to rise and move forward. If you liked this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our upcoming exciting stories. Every week, we bring inspiring tales that showcase human resilience and the ability to overcome any obstacle. And don't forget to activate the notification bell. This way, you'll be the first to see our new videos. Share this story with your friends and family. Together, we can spread messages of hope and positivity. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and remember, there is always light at the end of the time funnel. See you in the next video. Take care and see you soon.